Shall we begin?
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast on the E2KG network. This is episode 176. Prime, you were hosting us last week as we got to 175, a nice big number there, but we are rounding on our way to 200. Gentlemen, we have been doing this show for over 4 years in some capacity, so it is. I am glad to be with you here again tonight. Here and for all of you joining us, listening and viewing at some point in time, whether it is the night of January 21st, 2021, or if you are listening way off in the future or just minutes, days into the future. So we are here on the Enough to Keep Going podcast on the E2KG network. We are here every week to both cover news and gaming news and the industry. On our deep dive episodes, which is one tonight, we dive a little deeper into the news and analysis, not only kind of doing a rundown of the last 2 weeks' news, because there's plenty of other places that do that, but we try to provide a little bit of analysis, think of it from an industry perspective, think about what it means from a cultural perspective sometimes as well, but to peel back some layers. And we'll definitely try to do that tonight as you are joining us. And in those other weeks, those off weeks, we come at with a playlist. We've got our what we've been playing, we've got our GX show, our game experience show, where we not only talk about the games that we've been playing, and hopefully they'll be interesting to not only you, the listener and viewer, but also to each other, because sometimes we surprise ourselves with what we're playing. Uh, just like tonight, Prime was playing Disney Infinity 3.0, which is wonderful and fun, but not something I would have thought of in the year of 2021. So you never know what's going to show up on our playlist, but also because we are parents and because we like to make sure that our kids get their homework done, we also give ourselves some homework. And every week, every other week, we provide ourselves with a Pix Plays assignment. And so we'll talk about that, what that is coming up at the end of the show so that you know what to expect for next week. But this week, gentlemen, is our deep dive, and we've got some good news, some year-end news. It hasn't been a really busy time at the beginning of the year, but we got a couple reveals that were surprising potentially. So joining me tonight is Osiris Prime. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and shout out to Agasicles, who's probably playing Call of Duty right now.
That seems very likely. But the real question is, on what platform?
True.
And Swissguard, how are you, sir?
Doing pretty good. When you were in the lead and you're like now or in the future, I was waiting to see if you'd slip up and say or in the past, and then I was gonna wait to see how you got out of it. But you're professional, so you caught yourself ahead of time.
Well, I may not be a professional, but I did catch myself ahead of time because I started to realize, like, oh, minutes, weeks, hours. I started mixing up my time periods, but that's okay because I've watched Tenant and now I know that I can mix up my time and it'll all be okay. So going forward tonight, gentlemen, we have some pretty good news stories. So let's start off with some sales numbers. First off, we've got a fun little tidbit from Nintendo Life, which lets us know that last year the 3DS in Japan, the 3DS outsold all of the Xbox family. So not only Xbox One, but also the series as well. So that, um, you know, surprisingly, the 3DS sold 62,000 units, according to Famitsu, um, which isn't a whole lot when we think about console sales. But that also gives us a perspective of how little the Xbox brand is engaged and invested or has a market share within the Japanese market. That the numbers that Famitsu provided showed about 31,000 in Series S and X, and about 3,500 of Xbox Ones. So that gives us a perspective in terms of Japan sales. But what I want to spend more time on tonight is the NPD numbers. So we had NPD numbers from the year 2020. So not only the last quarter or the last month when we end up getting NPDs, but at the end of December we also get NPD numbers, which give us video game sales, both in consoles and also in games, and overall spending. And one of the news stories that we've been talking about, we talked about it on our 2020 wrap up show, was the significant increase in spending on games as entertainment in the year 2020. And that plays out in the NPD's final report for the year, that the video games have set a new record of $56.9 billion in 2020 in the United States. Again, that's a 27% increase from 2019. And this was, again, in part, right? This is a COVID related piece. This is not what we normally would have projected in 2019, compared to thinking about this as a transition year for hardware consoles. You usually see some decline before we see an increase in hardware sales again. But we've got some really strong numbers from NPD in terms of that 25% higher for December, even as well. So not only year over year from 19 to 20, but also month over month in the holiday time as well. And as always, I find the listing of what the top games are for the year in terms of sales. It's something that I followed for over a decade now, because it is just interesting to see where these play out over the course of a whole year. And sometimes you realize, oh, that was a flash in the pan, or holy cow, that really continues to set sales on fire. So the NPD sales numbers do not reflect um, digital sales from some platforms. So we get physical sales, and we get some digital sales, some platforms as well, but not everything. So in Nintendo's case, we do not always get to the platform or the eShop sales in there as well. So I'm going to run down the list, gentlemen, and then we'll come back, circle back around, and see if there's any surprises on this list. So not a big surprise for the last, what, 11 years at this point, is that Call of Duty is the number one game. And this year, Call of Duty is also the number two game. So Black Ops Cold War is the number one game, and Black Ops Modern Warfare is the number two game. Animal Crossing's New Horizon is number three. Madden is four. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is five. Last of Us Part 2 is six. Ghost of Tsushima, seven. 8 and 9 are Mario Kart Deluxe and Super Mario 3D All Stars. 10 and 11 are both Square games, with Final Fantasy VII Remake and Marvel's Avengers. Then we get another Marvel's game at number 12 with Miles Morales. And 13 is NBA 2K. And then we get Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And number 15 rounds out at FIFA 21. So I think we've talked about enough of the sales numbers in terms of overall console sales, or overall video game market sales for the year of 2020, because we talked about that on the news show. But looking at this list of game sales, gentlemen, is there anything that stands out to you? Anything that surprises you in terms of where something lands?
I'm surprised that Modern Warfare was number two for this year. I mean, I get Cold War and Black Ops, but I don't. I'm trying to figure out how Modern Warfare got to the number two spot there. So I don't. I'm not. That kind of shocks me. Everything else it seems pretty much on par. Um, nice
I
to
think the
see.
Modern Warfare thing is interesting as well, because we got Warzone that released in the spring, right? February, March,
Mhm.
maybe of 20. But
Yeah,
Warzone was a standalone mode that you didn't need to own Modern Warfare. So I would be interested to go back and look at those hardware sales to see if the engagement with Warfare created additional sales of the overall game, or if it is. And usually this is the case, that this I remember from years past, is that the previous year Modern Warfare almost always tracks in the top 10
yeah.
for from the year before, just uh, based on sales numbers. But you're right, having him as a 1-2 punch is pretty significant.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
think
crazy.
that's basically what jumped out at me. Call of Duty number 1 and number 2. It's easy for me to kind of like I'm not a Call of Duty guy, so I kind of I know Osiris Prime and Agasicles are really into it, and so there's a lot of chatter, but um it's really not on my radar when it comes to gaming. And so it's easy kind of in some ways it's easy for me to ignore like how much of like I get reminded, oh wow, look at the impact that this one franchise really has on gaming if they can capture that. And you didn't mention it, but number 20, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 um came in there. So Activision Blizzard uh gets 3 of the top 20 um non-digital games, I guess. Phys- um I, so I guess this is just for consoles. So we don't really know what
Yeah, we don't
World
see
of
Steam
Warcraft
or
yeah.
Blizzard, Blizznet type of things. Yeah.
PC
So
stuff.
so I was kind of curious how what else Activision Blizzard had that that might crack that, but it's kind of hard to tell with this one. But yeah, like I just there's so many game like Activision Blizzard's kind of like none of their games are really have been in my wheelhouse lately, and take number 1 and number 2. Um, Nintendo, you know, continues to be dominated by the same handful of titles. That's interesting. That's what also is it's not interesting, it's just like expected.
Yeah, it's consistent, right? That we
Yeah.
get Mario Kart in there, we get Super Smash Brothers in there. The fact that 3D All Stars ended up at number 9 um, was kind of surprising to me, but uh, maybe that's also the fact that it was driven by the artificial demand of being a limited release. Uh, Also, it's probably the only big release other than Pikmin 3 on the Switch this fall. So the interesting thing is sticking on Nintendo Swiss is we kind of have a sense we know what New Horizon sales numbers are because it came out in 2020 and Nintendo has told us that New Horizon has sold 26-27 million in terms of overall sales when they give their listing. um, and because now that also gives us a perspective of where modern warfare and call and Black Ops Cold War must be is significantly over that hump to get to the number 2 and number 1 spot as well.
Yeah, there's two other things too. Now that I'm looking at the list, Dragon Ball Z at 17. I mean, that's kind of surprising because I heard kind of mixed things on that game. That was released in January of last year, and I'm just kind of surprised it kept going. I don't know if there was any DLC for that or not. I don't remember hearing anything. I'm sure there probably was, more than likely, but that kind of
I think that there's been recent DLC as a matter of fact, but
okay. Yeah, that kind of jumped out at me. And then just it's nice to see, we had a lot of single player games in this list too. So, Cyberpunk and Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us Part 2. So, that's kind of nice. Miles Morales.
I think the DLC piece probably factors into Mortal Kombat 11 being at 16 as well because they had the what was it the aftermath or they had the kind of big expansion repackage and re-release that
Yeah.
happened this year as well. So drove some sales there, certainly.
I think that the biggest takeaway from top to bottom is that um well-known franchises sell. You say that Dragon Ball Z, it's a surprise that that game made it there mainly because and even if the game was middling, uh it's a very famous intellectual property. Um People want a DBZ game. We got all your major sports players. You got Call of Duty, Mario. Um it's kind of like there's nothing here that I mean some of the things are interesting, but I can see the angle why they made it in the top 10. There's nothing other than there's not one there that I would say like I have no idea how that got there. It's surprising that Modern Warfare is up there, but we know that Call of Duty's like a thing. So, It's just I think momentum would be the
Well,
word that I
really,
would
right? I mean,
use.
the only two new IPs in the top 20 are Cyberpunk at 19 and Ghost of Tsushima at 7. All the rest are continuations of franchises or, they have a brand established with them already.
And
Yeah, that's
of
true.
those two, I would almost feel like Cyberpunk is riding so much of the success from The Witcher, and then you had the Witcher Netflix series. So and then they throw Keanu Reeves in there. So it's almost like with Sucker Punch, I don't know how well Sucker Punch is known as like one of the like as a studio, kind of like in the way that a BioWare is. I'm not saying that they're not good. I'm just saying like
No, I think you're right, right?
I
It's
don't
not
think
a.
they have the brand
Mhm.
like to the wider audience. But a single player open world Sony game, people are gonna pick it up. So if I had to pick, and I know it's gonna sound like cliche for me to like praise Ghost of Tsushima, but if I had to pick one
No.
game that um in here that like almost earned is the wrong word, but um had the most obstacles to overcome. Maybe obstacles isn't even the right word, but didn't have as much wind at their back as some of these other things. It would probably be that one. But
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that, right? I think the only wind at their back is the what 100 million PlayStation consoles that are out there.
that's
Um,
true. We did
so
not get any Atari VCS titles on the top 20.
Did we even get the
so the one
VCS, huh?
thing that's fair enough. I mean, we got an Atari hotel, so that you can't ask for everything.
That's right.
But the piece here that I'm staring at is thinking about the Sony install numbers and what we were just talking about. Looking at number 11 and number 12, Marvel's Avengers and Spider-Man Miles Morales, both big Marvel games, but Marvel's Avengers is multi-platform. And so, yes, this isn't going to count Steam sales, but it is going to count Xbox and PlayStation, and it's coming in just above Marvel, Miles Morales, which was PlayStation exclusive. Um, so I think it speaks to and Sony, not Sony, but Square Enix has talked about Marvel's Avengers not hitting the numbers that they expected. This definitely appears that that is the case as well. Is that if it is underperforming, uh, you know, Final Fantasy VII, Super Mario 3D All Stars, and it's a multi-platform game. It really, for the big of as big of an IP as it is, it really speaks to the fact that it did not see the type of sales numbers or the long tail maybe that they were really hoping for with that IP.
Can you imagine though having being in the top 11 for the year of sales and having it be a disappointment? How much you would have had to invest in that to like what would have been the minimum criteria for sales
Yeah, right.
to be
That's a good
considered a
point.
success.
Well, I mean, this is also we know from past history that Rise of the Tomb Raider was considered uh, a failure or it didn't meet its mark even after hitting multi-million copies sold.
Yeah.
Or was it the original Tomb Raider, the reboot?
I think it was
But
the
it was
first.
one of
Yeah,
those
the first one of the reboot. Yeah.
where Square came out and said that it didn't hit their sales expectations, and
Yeah.
the industry basically said those expectations are not realistic. Um, but you're right. You're right. I mean, like you should be able to celebrate the fact that you're in the top 20 at all. And I think it is another interesting piece here is what the digital sales look like in terms of where do some smaller games creep up into here, or do they because these are in sales in dollars, smaller games are never going to necessarily break the top 20 because they're 20 bucks a pop, versus 60 or 70 in some cases. But in terms of overall numbers sold, I do wonder if those numbers look different as well. But that is a discussion for a different day.
Yes. How
Any other thoughts
how
here, gentlemen?
Yeah, I had one more thought of just kind of like a kind of a what if. So would this be drastically different, this chart, if there was no COVID last year? Do you think, or to be pretty much the same, or maybe just kind of jumbled around a little bit?
I don't know that the chart would be drastically different. I
I mean,
think
obviously, Call of Duty is probably going to be up on top, at least
right. I mean, I
Cold
think
War.
the
But
the the quantity of sales numbers would not be as high. I think as Swiss was just saying, I mean, these are a lot of the regular suspects. Like these are a lot of existing IPs. I don't know that there's a big wave of surprise hits in here.
yeah,
I,
Um,
I I think we might have touched on this in the superlatives show, but Animal Crossing hit right as the lockdowns were occurring. So if there was one game that you could maybe look at and say, this was influenced by it, um, as people were initially being at home, especially with the schools closing down, then you have a new Nintendo IP hitting the market that got some good buzz. I could maybe see that, but I don't think it was anything that would have made Animal Crossing, you know, um, I don't think COVID was the difference between Animal Crossing being a smash hit, like a smash hit for Nintendo or not. I
yeah,
think it was going to be strong regardless.
yeah, given the install base, given the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of other new releases for the Switch at that time, but I do think you're right that certainly the lockdown around COVID and safer at home pieces uh, bolstered those sales for sure. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our next topic area, and this is a good. We'll move from you know stressing out over sales to let's stress out over another well-established IP, and we get the announcement from Disney that Lucasfilm Games is returning. That it is having this is not Lucas Arts. Uh, this is another banner of creating a Lucasfilm banner for video games, but it is also means that they are continuing to outsource. This is not an internal piece as well. So we get the information here on a number of sites, but we've got that Lucasfilm Games is returning. Uh, that it has two new partners that we know of at least already. One of them being Bethesda. Well, not Bethesda. One of them being Machine Games. Correct? Technically Bethesda because Bethesda owns Machine Games. Machine Games, the creators of the most recent Wolfenstein series. So we go from shooting Nazis with amazing, spectacular railguns to whipping Nazis as Indiana Jones. And so we get an announcement of an Indiana Jones game. And then we also get an announcement, and this one I think is where I was really kind of surprised because we get the announcement that Ubisoft is uh, developing an open world Star Wars game. That Lucasfilm Games tells EA that they are altering the deal. That EA still has a deal to produce, but it is no longer exclusive. And so this came just last week, a week and a half ago or so, that we know that Massive, the developers behind the Division and the Division 2, are the ones that are working on this game. They're going to be using the Snowdrop engine, which is the engine that runs Division and Division 2, which is a pretty realistic looking engine. Does a lot of big scenery, um, not a lot of jumping. So maybe this is not a Jedi type of game. Um, I was thinking about that right away. Like you can't really jump in the division. You can kind of mantle over things, climb up things. So maybe this is, Maybe this is a bounty hunter piece or something else. Lots of speculation potentially. But so those are the two big pieces there. We also got an announcement from Lucasfilm Games that they are adding some Series X and S and PlayStation 5 enhancements to Respawn's Jedi Star Wars Jedi The Fallen Order. Want to make sure I get the full title with multiple colons in there as well. So which is a really good news actually because that game struggled to lock a consistent frame rate on the previous generation consoles and having it, it looks beautiful in HDR. I'm sure putting it on the current new generation is going to look even better, but having it run at a stable frame rate is going to make a nice difference as well, especially in a game where you have a lot of parries and parry windows, which are essential to combat. So, gentlemen, any one of these, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, uh, either one of these really kind of strike your fancy, get excited about what's coming next?
A little bit intrigued with or excuse me, not the Star Wars game, the Indiana Jones game. Just because I'm trying to think how many Indiana Jones games we've had. I mean, it's definitely been a long time. I'm sure there's some back in the day.
Been a very long time. Yeah, I mean, the ones that I keep remembering are like, what the Fate of Atlantis, or the Lucas Arts kind of adventure games, or maybe I think there was a Super Nintendo one as well. So yes, it's been a long time.
So, and I like, machine games, what they did with Wolfenstein. And so that's intriguing a little bit just because while it's an established franchise, it's in game terms, it could be fresh depending on what they do. Um, the Star Wars stuff is not as it's more interesting from the business side than it is from the. I mean, how many Star Wars games come out every year at this point? It's ever since Dis, Di- that's a argument for not the show, but like Disney's, definitely mining that um
Well, I would say
intellectual
that there
property.
are
But
there are a lot fewer Star Wars games coming out every year than there are new series announced for Disney Plus or movies coming out, right? Like, but
that's
yes,
fair.
they are mining that IP. That's for certain. And I think maybe that is I could see that explanation works here as well. Is that if they are leaning that hard into that IP in other media, that they are potentially feeling like they're falling behind or untapped potential here in video game development because if we've the EA deal only really got them 3 games.
The going from these stories as well. Um, the first story we referenced was from PC Gamer, and that was 10 days ago. And there was a little bit of talking at like, does this mean that Lucasfilm is kind of going under EA or what? There was still a little bit of confusion or unknowns with that, but in the coming days, it was definitely clarified. Like EA's not involved, and I think that's a big takeaway. Um, with games going to Ubisoft. I'm curious whether the Indiana Jones game is going to, in fact, be an Xbox exclusive now that Bethesda is under that umbrella. Um, I can definitely see it if this is, Disney farming, like, those out to different, you know, development studios, that there's an agreement to maybe there'll be like a exclusivity window, but I can imagine that that's going to go multi-platform. I can't imagine that Disney would be satisfied putting the first Indiana Jones game in however long, but it's only on Xbox and PC. It's going to
Yeah, I
probably
would agree with you there that there's definitely th- it, there's too much money on the table
right.
if it's not multi-platform.
But
And
it did
I
happen
don't
with Spider-Man though. Spider-Man's locked into one. Spider-Man game's locked into one console.
I feel like Spider-Man has a whole history of legal warfare behind.
That's true.
That's
But
I
there's
think the other
precedent.
challenge there would be is that it's locked into the console that has sold the most units as well, right? I think that you know it's a it's a harder sell if you're the second place console in terms of keeping exclusivity. I mean,
How, po-
potentially there's a price tag involved that makes that possible.
Mhm.
how popular is Indiana Jones in Japan?
I don't
And
know.
maybe 32,000 units worth. I don't know.
Will they be clamoring for it?
That one Konami guy likes it, doesn't he? It was a Konami guy, the one who did
Yeah,
Castlevania.
Igarashi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because he
yep,
always has the
with
whip
his
and the
whip
hat.
and hat. Yep.
Yeah, that's one.
So, any other thoughts here? I mean, again, this is pretty early to report. This has been a kind of slow news cycle. Not a lot of details here, but a lot of potential for speculation.
Yeah,
Which,
I was just gonna say for the Indiana Jones, all we know is the studio, right? That's making it. We don't know if it's like open world, like the one they announced for Ubisoft. As far as I've
no,
seen.
we don't know anything beyond that. It's Bethesda. Yep,
Okay.
from
a machine
from
game.
a simple marketing perspective, um, going with Lucasfilm Games does have that nostalgia kick because I mean, we all played those old LucasArts games and um, I don't know, just seeing the headline and seeing Lucasfilm Games made me re-experience some of the feelings of booting up Rogue Squadron on the N64 and seeing the logo pop up. It's not the same logo. I know it's not quite the same name, um, but I guess kudos to whatever focus group led them down that path of
Close enough though.
naming. Yeah. And it
Yeah, right.
also
Keep envisioning
struck
the
my
little
age.
character holding the hands out with the little stars above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think, like you said, it's still pretty early before we can really get excited because, a lot can happen between now and then. And the game may turn out to be a steaming pile of failure.
Yeah, and EA did say that they're still making Star Wars games, at least for now. So we'll see how long. Their deal is up. What, next year, I believe, or 2023.
It said 2023.
Oh, okay, 23.
So uh, it's close enough to the end where it could be quote unquote altering the deal. But
I mean, they could
as
just
as
like
they said,
spit out some more Battlefronts and Jedi Fallen Orders
yeah.
sequels, I guess,
Well,
at the very least.
well, that was funny in this other PC game article announcing the Ubisoft Star Wars game. um, EA posted a tweet saying, "We love Star Wars. We look forward to continuing our partnership with Lucasfilm Games. We're making more Star Wars games. BD1 is still the cutest." And that just smack like it just reeks of dust of
We're still
yeah.
here.
They had a
Yeah, I
bad
saw that. I'm
Aspiration.
like, oh, me too. Me too. Okay,
they had a
get
bad
us.
day on
Yeah.
the interwebs, but um, I think if they had been more successful, this may not have happened. So
And I think that, yeah, I think you're right. I think if the numbers would have been stronger, um, or the controversies would have been fewer,
Yeah.
uh, it certainly would have. uh, But at the same time, I think I think the multi-developer front, the non-exclusivity front for an IP that broad, also feels unsustainable. And I think EA showed us this. Like, it is almost unsustainable from a developer aspect within a single publisher because even EA had multiple studios working on it, but in order to get games completed, they were pulling people off games in order to, they were shifting people around, moving talent around in order to get things completed. That, Motive started with developing a single player game and then got pulled into the single player aspect of Battlefront 2. And then they took what they had worked on there and turned it into uh, the Star Wars Squadrons. What was it called? That just came out this fall.
Yeah. Squadrons. Yeah.
The X-Wing one, Squadrons, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess technically we did get 4 games out of EA so far. Um,
well, this is another hypothetical. Um, say that they had put out, you know, 6 to 8 games and had less controversy and there's better sellers. I agree with you that it would be in Disney's interest to like spread that out further. But would we be having that announcement in 2023 instead of 2021 when EA's deal was up?
Yeah, right. I mean, the fact that we get an announcement now without any really thing to show also means that, yeah, there's some boardroom politics going on here to get an announcement this early, because it's not like it dropped with a trailer. It's not even like it dropped with renders or pre-rendered footage, or even artistic sketches of
Yeah.
what they hope it will be. Right. This is very pre-production potentially. But it also, I think, in some ways, the boardroom politics of this is it does put some pressure on EA to say, you've got 2 years to put something out, or we're already showing you what we're already in the market to do.
You know, and it might be a little bit different. You mentioned like them kind of spreading out, but at least they're spreading out to different companies. It's not like they're just, it's just not like EA who had one. They're one company that's spreading out to their, own development teams. This is actually spreading out to like different developers too. So it might be a little bit different. Maybe they can pull it off doing that, but I guess they kind of did that before and everything fell apart too. So they had to close down the studio. So who knows?
Well, they were trying to develop a lot of stuff in house initially. Is that they had their
Yeah.
Disney studios, which really is what shut things down. But yeah, I can remember having a conversation at some point in time, not necessarily on the podcast, but in a back channel, um, related to the idea of giving the IP to a developer that knows how to do something with it, right? Like, if you're going to give Indiana Jones, you probably are thinking, my first two choices would be the logical Indiana Jones extensions of Crystal Dynamics or Naughty Dog. But I can see where Machine Games, you could make an argument in there that they've created some pretty narrative driven adventures, um, putting a big open world Star Wars game in the hands of Ubisoft, which is a studio, a publisher that has all kinds of studios developed to making open world games, seems to make a whole lot of sense.
They have 9 million
Um,
studios, I think. It seems
yep.
like they got so many.
Right at the time, putting Star Wars with, putting Battlefront with a studio that makes Battlefield made sense as well.
Mhm.
That there was some pairing there of logical pieces, but as you said, Prime, like putting all the eggs in one basket puts a lot of stress on a publisher to find and have the right talent and creative people to be able to capitalize on that. And that's part of where EA struggled, is that they had good talent and good people, but being able to execute that within the structure that they were in seems to be where they've had a number of canceled projects, as we know about as well, related to Star Wars.
Yeah.
If you guys could indulge me, I have another hypothetical for you.
We're full of hypotheticals tonight, so keep
Oh yeah.
on rolling.
If you are maybe not at the boardroom level of EA, but you're a development studio, are you secretly relieved about this? Because you're like, finally, maybe I can spread my creative wings a little bit, and we're not going to be under the pressure from our corporate overlords to maximize the profits from one of Disney's premier intellectual properties.
If I was in that spot, I would. That's what my perspective would be. I mean, even as a Star Wars fan, I would feel like, yeah, we had a run at it. As a creative person, I would think you'd want the opportunity to do something different, or to at least have the potential to do something more.
I think that's one of the coolest things about the Horizon Zero Dawn story with Guerrilla Games when they were just like asking their employees just what ideas do you have? And we don't care if it's not something that we've normally done, you know, we'll take a look at them and having that I think that um that freedom that like that gave him some energy, I think, to be able to do something new. And even if you get like if you're a team that gets like a Star Wars game, like I've there's a part of me that's like everybody else is doing it too, and it's so much in the zeitgeist right now. I could actually feel like that is like a little bit draining from an energy perspective. So I don't know. I'm very pessimistic on the whole Star Wars franchise at the moment. So I'm glass half empty kind of guy with that. But yeah, that's if I'm on a team where I can be like, finally, like all those like projects that we have in the vault that the suits have been telling us, you know, you're not going to do. Maybe we get to crack those open soon. So that can be exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Good perspective. Thank you, Swiss. Any other final thoughts here on Disney, Lucasfilm games, Star Wars?
Just for the Jedi Fallen Order, I was just kind of nice to see that did they actually did some stuff for the newer generation games. This is what, over a year old now. That game's 19, I believe, right?
2019, fall of 19. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool that I mean, it's not like they didn't like totally redo the game or anything to next gen, but they added the assets they needed to make it look prettier and just kind of run a little bit better. So that's kind of cool. I thought that was kind of cool of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is, and I think as you are an Xbox Series X owner, I would encourage you to give it a try because it ran pretty well on my PC. It chugged a little bit on my Xbox One X, but I bet it's going to look pretty nice and run pretty well on the Series X.
Yeah, I definitely want to check it out. And I did get the download, so I'm ready to go.
Nice. That's good, right? And now it's on Game Pass because EA Play is wrapped into that as well.
Good.
So, one final news story here, gentlemen, and this one is a little more fun at the end of our news night. Last week we had the Monster Hunter Rise demo for the Switch. Monster Hunter Rise is coming out this spring, but we got a demo with a few hunts in it, and as it released, that it crashed the eShop. Started as a slowdown, turned into a general crash for a little while. That the demand was high enough that we had some significant issues here. Um, Swiss Prime, did either of you try the Monster Hunter demo, or have you tried the Monster Hunter demo yet?
Yeah, I tried it. I think I talked about it a little bit on the last show. I tried it and I just
That's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of jumped off it just because I couldn't invert the controls. But evidently, from what I saw or from what I read later on, a couple other forums that I went to, they did say you can invert the controls, and that was my problem. I couldn't invert the controls, so I definitely want to go back in and try it because it seemed a little bit maybe more kind of newbie friendly because I haven't really tried a Monster Hunter game in like a long time. I can't even remember the last one I tried to do. I think it might have been one of the other portable systems, maybe even like the PSP or something. So
Yeah, not very intro friendly there.
yeah,
Yeah, they really didn't get there until they got to World, where they gave you a nice onboarding piece. And
yeah, just kind of some of the other things I read about it. It's kind of you can do a little bit of like Zelda-esque, like kind of climbing stuff and going around the environment a little bit more. So that sounds like it'd be kind of cool. So I definitely want to give it another try. But yeah, I threw this story in here, just because I thought it was kind of funny that you know, and obviously, Nintendo doesn't have their most robust online system as it is, but you never really hear of any of the games kind of going down. They might have problems every once in a while, maybe when a game first comes out, but you never just hear something like totally going down or having a lot of problems. I thought it was kind of funny that
yeah, the only
of
other
all
time
things, it was Monster Hunter that caused a demo that caused it.
right. I mean, I think that's a strong sign about how prolific this IP is across the world, right? Like the Switch has really strong sales in all territories, and to put it out, um, that Monster Hunter World not only was a success with the existing, uh, significant fan base, but also brought in a whole lot of new people to it as well. And so, yeah, the only other time I can think of when the eShop has crashed has been like on Christmas Day when everybody's trying to get on for new stuff.
Yeah,
Um, but you're right. I haven't really heard of many other times when we've had that type of traffic on the eShop. So I think that's a good sign for Capcom that this is still their kind of their premier franchise. which is great from right, which went to like a niche or a Japanese hit on the PSP to really become an international bestseller. So, which is good for Capcom.
Yeah, I think with each iteration, it kind of it's like a slow build for this series. Like like when I first saw it, I was like, "Ah, I have never even heard of this game before. But obviously, like around the world, it's like super huge, especially in Japan and stuff. So it's definitely been a slow build with this series. But yeah, I think it's definitely starting to hit its stride. And I know World recently, or maybe a few months ago, was on the Game Pass also. So you know, it's getting a good bit of attention on there too.
Yeah, it just came off sometime late last year. So, all right, gentlemen, we are clocking in at under an hour, so that is good. Any other news stories that either of you had that you want to give a shout out to? Something that struck a chord with you over the last 2 weeks?
No, not really. Like you mentioned earlier, it's been kind of slow.
It
It's been
has
kind of
been. It
slow
has been,
lately.
which is okay. It's been a good time to play games, which is good for us. So last week we had a significantly longer show. We stretched almost to 90 minutes as we talked about all the games that we've been playing. And next week we'll come back and have a good long discussion about our games that we've been playing as well. That we've got our next Pix Plays assignment. So again, remember that since we are grown-ups who game, we've got uh, we'd like to give ourselves an assignment, and this assignment for next week, gentlemen, if you haven't started it already, here's your reminder from your teacher that we're going to look at some of our most anticipated games of 2021, and we talked about what some of those might be last time. But now we're gonna go back into our backlog or even items that are in Game Pass or other places where we may have access to them in subscription services, or maybe we even decide to purchase one because it's on sale. But we're gonna look at something that's a close fit. Maybe it's the same developer, maybe it's a similar genre, tone. That we're gonna look at something similar to this. So we're gonna come ready to discuss that we're getting ready for our exciting new game in 2021 by going back to playing a similar game in maybe the franchise, maybe the developer, maybe just in the same headspace. So we've got a couple options here. Swiss, are you bending the rules again and doing Astral
No,
Chain?
no, 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 no.
Okay,
I
so
think we
so how
should
does
do.
Astral Chain connect to what you weren't on the show last? Well, what's your what game does Astral Chain connect to?
Well, I actually did some research for this homework assignment. I didn't just wing it.
Oh,
So
well,
I
let me see your references at the end of your homework
well, I
and
went
get
to
some extra
I
credit.
forget which site it was because I didn't write it down. But went to a site. What are the releases coming in 2021? What do we got on the horizon? And I saw that Platinum Games was putting out uh, near Automata remake or whatever it was, re in something starts with an R, but I really like Near Automata, and
It's the original Near.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
and I was like, ooh, I'll get that Platinum Games game that I haven't played that I've wanted to play. So I went to my local GameStop and picked up a used copy of Astral Chain.
Nice. Excellent.
And my older kids have been playing it and really enjoying it. So I'm looking forward to starting it this weekend.
Cool. I'm looking forward to hearing both your impressions, but also your kids' impressions. So that's great. Prime, you had played Astral Chain a little bit, didn't you?
No,
Last
I
2 years ago when it came out.
I never played that one, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
another one I need to jump into eventually.
Yes, we all have plenty in our backlog.
Oh yeah.
So, so next week, Swiss, as you have given us your homework assignment, and thank you for volunteering to go first.
Huh.
Swiss, you'll get some extra credit points here by being the host of next week's episode. So
That's not
you
extra credit.
you
That's
will be
extra work.
hosting. Ah, yes, it is. But don't worry, I'll be here. We'll fill in the gaps. Myself and Agasicles will be back next week to talk about the games that we're playing. Prime, you are off next week, so enjoy your week rotation.
Yep. No,
And
pick's
we'll
place
see
for
you
me. Even
again.
though I'll still play the games that
Uh,
I'm gonna pick.
we'll still play lots of
Descenders
games. Yeah.
and that was my pick.
Oh,
What,
that's
what
right. Is it
Descenders?
Descenders?
Yeah, well, Descenders, SSX, Tony Hawk, those kind of sports extreme games because of
Yes,
Riders
because you were
Republic.
getting ready for Riders Republic. Yeah.
Assuming
Yep.
that comes out this year.
Oh, it'll come out, even though
Mhm.
it got delayed, right? That was the one where it got delayed like hours before we went on the podcast.
Yeah.
So,
What was your
Yep.
pick for next week?
my pick.
You didn't have it on here.
No, I did not have it on here because I
Change
was hedging my bets. But I think it's probably going to be. I'm going to go back and play, the Batgirl DLC for Arkham Knight that I picked up the season pass because it was like $5 or so over, maybe $7 over sales. But the Batgirl aspect of it, the DLC is made by Warner Brothers Montreal, which is doing Gotham Knights. And after just spending the last week finishing up last season of Batwoman, so that I'm ready for the new Batwoman season, I'm ready to to have some long-haired crime fighting in my future here. So,
Nice.
all right, gentlemen, thank you again for a good night. Thank you again for a good discussion. And thank you for everyone listening, tuning in. Please feel free to continue to join us. We are glad to have you engage us online as well. But we will be here with you every week on the Enough to Keep Going podcast and the E2KG network. So for myself, DBQ Hams, Osiris Prime, and Swissguard, play the games you love those you play with, and take care of those around you. Good night.
Oh, for sure.